Good Tuesday evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to welcome all of those sitting in our audience. I'd also like to welcome all of those watching us live, remotely streaming on Wisconsin Eye Television. This is the 77th Assembly District Candidates Forum, sponsored in part by 100 Black Men of Madison. Our co-sponsors, Mount Zion Baptist Church, the African Association of Madison, the University of Wisconsin, the NAACP Dane County Branch, Madison Metropolitan Chapter of the Lynx, the Latino Consortium for Action, Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority, the Madison Alumni Chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority, the Madison Network of Black Professionals, and Omega Psi Phi Gamma Gamma Chapter. This is truly a momentous occasion. We are joined by 4 candidates who are vying for your vote for the 77th Assembly District seat. To my left, the candidates are Mark Garthwaite. Oh, there you are. Your other left. Okay, my other left. To my immediate right, Mark Garthwaite. To my far left, John Imes. To my immediate left, Shabnam Lofti. And to my far right, Sheila Stubbs. How about a hand for those folk? Our co-sponsors and our esteemed panelists are the Reverend Dr. Peggy Williams. Stand and face the camera, please. Ray Kumapai, President of the African Association of Madison. Leslie Orentia, Director of Community Relations, the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Greg Jones, President of the NAACP Dane County Branch. Julia Holdman, President, the Madison Metropolitan Chapter of the Lynx Incorporated. Norma Gallegos, the Latino Consortium for Action. Nichelle Nichols, President of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. Terry Strong, President of Madison Alumni Chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority. Sharon Johnson, Madison Network of Black Professionals. And finally, Attorney Arlington Davis of Omega Psi Phi Gamma 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 Chapter. As we move through the evening, by the way, my name is J.R. Sims, and I'm going to be your moderator in case you didn't figure that out yet. As we move through the evening, each candidate will have an opportunity to provide opening remarks. Each candidate will be given 3 minutes for those opening remarks. We will then allow our panelists to pose questions to the candidates. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to answer each question. And then as we close our forum, each candidate will be given 3 minutes for closing remarks. At this time, we are going to begin with our opening statements. And as I advised the candidates earlier, now I'm going to start on my extreme left.
Thanks, JR, and thanks to the sponsor and, of course, all the co-sponsors. I'm John Imes, and we all know Wisconsin needs a solid new direction. We've become this low road state with policies that favor well-connected interests over the environment, over workers, over our communities. And I'm running to replace that and move beyond those very extreme and divisive policies with high road progressive strategies. And I bring a unique background. I'm a small business owner. I'm a nonprofit leader. I'm an elected official. And I've got a track record for working effectively with different stakeholders on different issues over the years. I grew up in the Milwaukee area, south side of Milwaukee. My dad was a window cleaner, did not finish high school. And my grandfather, though, grew up a few blocks from here on Cedar Street, right off the park. One of those really, really tiny houses. Those houses are like 400 square feet, 5 kids, and his brother ran the zoo till about 1960. So our family spent a lot of time here. I remember biking around here as a kid and staying with our cousins nearby. And I can tell you, Kathy and I were looking for a place to start a business and raise our family, and we chose Madison almost 25 years ago. We own the Arbor House Inn on Monroe Street, National Award-winning Green Inn, raised 4 kids there. Very active on Monroe Street. I'm on the Monroe Street Merchants Board. We had a board meeting this afternoon, as a matter of fact. And very involved with the greening initiatives, not responsible for the road construction. Just want to be clear about that. I just want to remind folks to help the businesses there as well. For the most, we're halfway done, help the businesses there. My day job, I run Wisconsin Environmental Initiative, a nonprofit I co-founded. I was the chair of the board. I've been director now for 20 years. And we've got a pretty good track record of working with different stakeholders, whether they're environmental groups or local officials or business groups, to do good work. And on issues that matter to you, we've been very involved with green infrastructure and clean energy and clean water and green urbanism initiatives. The other thing I'll say is I'm an elected official. I've been a trustee in Sherwood Hills since 2012. I'm Personnel Committee Chair, Plan Commission, Joint Campus Review Board, President Pro Tem. As Personnel Committee Chair, I got 20% in increases over 5 years for our workers after Act 10, because we take care of our own. I never understood this onus of putting pressure on our workers, the folks that are providing public services that are desired and deserved of our residents. And then lastly, I'll just say very quickly, I've been a good Democrat and a good progressive. I worked very hard for Barack Obama. I was on the Wisconsin Steering Committee and on the Energy and Environmental Policy team. I also protested, I signed, I circulated, I called. I knocked on doors on the south side of Madison in December of 2011. Because what was happening was a wrong, and I can talk more about that. We're at time. So thanks so much for coming out.
And that was John Imes. Next, I'd like to bring up for opening remarks, Shabnam Lofti.
Good evening. My name is Shabnam Lofti. I am a Democrat. I am a Badger. I'm an attorney, and I have sued the Trump administration in federal court. It's a class action lawsuit on behalf of 150 million immigrants. But I want to talk a little bit about you guys. I have knocked on a whole lot of doors all over this district, and I've talked to a lot of people. Some of you are lefty liberals, and some of you are moderate Democrats. And some of you get so excited when I say I've gone after Trump. And others say, what is happening to our country? Have we lost our sanity in politics? But the one thing you all have in common is a whole lot of heart. You love this state. You wouldn't be at this forum otherwise. And what that signals to me is that you have expectations of your representative. You want someone with a solid, strong work ethic. You want someone that will communicate with you. You want someone that will return your phone calls, that will return your emails. But you also want someone with morals and integrity. You want someone that will treat you with respect, no matter your status in society. I have tried to be that person. I have tried to be a rock for people in my community, somebody that people can lean on during tough times. I have driven an hour and a half to Ron Johnson's office in Milwaukee for a 5-minute conversation on healthcare. I have seen a post on Facebook at 11 o'clock at night by a teacher that I've never met who needs support at the Capitol 7 o'clock in the morning the next day. I have brought strength, hope, a vision for the future, and if I am so lucky and privileged to be your representative, I will do everything I can to make you proud. Thank you.
That was Ms. Lofti. I would like to bring to the podium for his opening remarks Mark Garthwaite.
Thank you very much. 4 months ago, I don't think I would have ever imagined that I would be up here. I would probably be watching on Wisconsin Eye, but things change very rapidly in the world we live in today. I'm Mark Garthwaite. I'm very gratified to see a room full of people tonight. This is very humbling to stand before you with fellow candidates up here. A little bit about me. I originally grew up on a dairy farm in southwestern Wisconsin. I make a point of saying that because we're applying for a job here, and anytime I've ever applied for a job, if I told somebody that I grew up on a farm, that was the clincher, because they knew that they would get somebody that was going to work hard, somebody who knew how to work hard, and I pledge to you that I will work hard for you. After high school, I came to UW-Madison. I latched on in a research lab on campus, working a student job. It was a lab in the Department of OBGYN on campus. That turned into a 17-year career in biomedical research. So I went from tossing hay bales to sequencing genes and working with stem cells, which sounds like a really unique story, but the Wisconsin I grew up in, that's not supposed to be unique. That's the commitment that we make to every citizen of our state, that we will give you a good education, we will give you a shot at a Big Ten education, and you will have every opportunity to succeed. I believe everyone should have that same opportunity. So that's one of the reasons why I'm running, is I feel that we are not making the commitment to the public institutions that make that possible. And I'll talk a little bit more, hopefully, on the overarching theme of restoring faith in our public institutions. My day job now is, it sounds really cool. I run the nonprofit trade association for craft breweries. I do not sit around and drink beer all day. They actually operate very small businesses and communities all around the state, and they have many of the concerns that others around the state have. They want to be able to provide health insurance for their employees. I want to get that done for them. They want to be able to keep their employees in their communities so they can grow, be an engine of economic development there, and not have to worry that they can't take care of their employees. So most of the work I do now is actually in regulatory compliance for them. It sounds, beer sounds awesome, but I'm the only candidate here who's actually worked with the current legislature, and you would be quite surprised that you can actually build some very unlikely partnerships and coalitions and alliances in an environment that is very different than what we often see in local government here in Madison. So I do have the experience of actually working across very divided party lines and actually getting people to do the right.
That was Mark Garthwaite. And next, for her opening remarks, Ms. Sheila Stubbs.
Thank you all for being here this evening. I am excited. I am honored to be running for state assembly for this district because I'm putting my experience and my passion to work as we face so many challenges in the state of Wisconsin. My track record is someone who always brings solutions, and I always take bold stances. The people of the 77th district expect a fighter in the state legislature, someone who's going to stand up for education, someone who's going to work to reduce racial disparities, someone who is going to protect our environment, someone who's going to defend a woman's right to choose, someone who's going to take that notion to write tougher gun control laws, someone who's going to make sure we have access to health care for every Wisconsinite, and someone who's going to take care of our seniors, our most vulnerable populations, and people with disabilities. That's what I've done. That's what I'll continue to do. I'll be effective. I'll be bold, and I'll do it with passion. As I knock on the doors in this district, and I knocked so many doors, people talk to me about a number of issues. but they simply tell me this issue. Our priorities in the state of Wisconsin are simply upside down. We spend too much taxpayer dollars building prisons and on the Department of Corrections versus our world-class UW systems. And here in the state of Wisconsin, we failed to accept the expansion of Medicaid, a federal program that would have allowed more families in the state of Wisconsin to have health care. And in addition, in my own district, right here in South Madison, we've seen a record number of floods. It's lake levels. And yet, if you go on the website of the Department of Natural Resources, they have decided not to include two words: climate change. We need change, and we need a fighter who's going to bring about that change, and that fighter name is Sheila Stubbs. You know, I come from a family who have strong ties and bondage into social justice and equity work. I moved here to Madison from Beloit, Wisconsin just 45 minutes ago. And one night, my mother, Linda Hoskins, who's in the audience, was watching TV. And she saw this community called Simpson Street on TV that was identified as this notorious gang, drug, violent community. And guess what my mother did? She moved me to Madison, Wisconsin, right in the middle of crime. And you know what? We revitalized a community over 25 years that I still live in and that I'm proud of. And that's the fighter that you will elect when I go to the state legislature. Thank you.
That concludes opening remarks. How about a round of applause for all four candidates? We are next going to move to our questions from our candidate, from our partners. To determine who goes first, we're going to exercise a painstakingly scientific method. Siri, toss a coin. Okay, it's heads. We are going to start here with you, Mark, and we will work our way to you, Sheila, and then John. Okay, this question is being posed by the Reverend Dr. Peggy Williams. You may stand up and face the camera and state your question.
There's much discussion about treating mental illness, but there is barely any dialogue concerning the eradication of the issues that foster mental illness, such as environments of housing and food insecurity. As a Democrat member of the State Assembly that is currently composed of 63 Republicans and 35 Democrats, what will you do to address the conditions that advance family stability and abolish conditions that serve as the catalyst for mental instability? Mr.
Garthwaite.
That's a great question. First of all, I want to say I was a scientist for 17 years, and that's not the scientific method. So I just want to clarify that. I'm glad you brought up the housing insecurity. So it related to mental health issues. When you look at what the trauma issues, events that cause trauma in children, housing insecurity is a big one. It's right there at the top of the list. So Madison schools actually have a 13% mobility rate, which refers to the amount of kids that have housing insecurity. There are some schools, including one that a lot of the kids in our district go to, that has a mobility rate as high as 30%. That's a pretty mind-boggling number to think of. That's 30% of your kids that don't have stable housing, so they're not going to the same school every day, or they're going to this same school for certain stretches of time, and then they're going to a different school depending on where they're actually able to find housing. These are very mentally traumatic experiences for young kids. And then the nutritional aspect of not having access to healthy foods, regular access to healthy food, of course, is another traumatic event in a kid's life. As far as what we do in the legislature to address this issue, funding priorities are important. So I think a lot of the socioeconomic problems that we are not fixing, we're asking the schools to fix those problems. So I think we need to identify or prioritize funding toward affordable housing and making sure that we have stable places for kids to live. So Epic actually, what I did not realize is that Epic, the big company out in Verona now, is a driver of a lot of that housing insecurity, because the young professionals that work there need housing, and their developers are building housing to accommodate that, and they're
Ms. Stubbs.
Is it on? Thank you. It's a very compound, complex question. But before we can talk about housing, we need to talk about affordability, and we need to talk about how much money we're paying people. We must pay people a minimum wage of $15 an hour. At the county board, within the next couple of years, we will have people at that level. Second of all, we must continue to put dollars in at affordable housing like we've done at the county. We've given $1 million over to Nehemiah Corporation to create different types of housing needs for those that return back into our community that are incarcerated. We need to take care of grandparents that are being the foster parents for many of our children. In addition to that, we have to be creative with mental health services. We need to continue to fund mental health services in our school. Dane County has been a leader with many restorative justice models of giving dollars right in the school for mental health services. In addition, right here in South Madison, we are struggling with the grocery store. I have been fighting for over 13 years to get a grocery store in South Madison. And one thing they tell me is we don't have enough houses in South Madison. But food is a necessity. And we have to stop allowing systems to tell us what we cannot have. And food security is a must and a priority. So we have to get together and work all three systems. And in addition, I believe we need to keep working on creating opportunities, not just for the haves, but also for the have-nots. And in addition, take this number. African Americans are 15 times more likely to be put in foster homes and residential care because of not having housing as one of the areas. So take that information when we think about the issues that we are faced with right here in Madison. Affordable housing must happen in Madison, Wisconsin, for everyone.
Mr. Imes.
Sounds like Sheila's got home field advantage here tonight, but no, I appreciate it. Let me just say on the affordable housing, through my nonprofit, I work a lot with the housing developers here in Madison, actually statewide. We actually green certify all of the affordable housing projects in the state, about 15,000 units and new homes over the years. So I work a lot with the folks that actually do that work. And to the mayor's credit and to his staff's credit, they have made real investments to add 1,000 units of affordable housing. I think that situation is going to continue to improve. In terms of food security, I would agree. I mean, the schools are really key to this, and we're not funding the schools at the levels that we need to fund. We certainly are not funding the support resources, the counselors, the social workers, the school nurses, the mental health professionals to recognize families that may be in traumatic situations or kids that are not in a good position to succeed. So we need to make sure that we provide that additional funding to recognize where folks are starting to fall through the cracks so that they can be in a better position to succeed. And then lastly, let me say, there's an opportunity here for food entrepreneurship and job-driven development for this part of the community. I was very involved with the Garver Feed Mill on the east side. I can tell you as that project is moving forward, it's built into the contracts that 1/2 or 1/3 of all the workers there have to come from low-income households. and have to come within 2 miles of the Garver feed mill. So we need those kinds of entrepreneurial opportunities so people can invest, people can work, people can thrive, and we can actually address some of the issues of food security in our community. Thank you.
Ms. Lofti.
Thank you. I think it's a great question. Thank you for asking that. But first, I want to answer why I think that that is so important. The reason I think it's important is because when I look at people, I see the commonalities that we have more than our differences. So regardless of someone's status, regardless of someone's zip code, when I look at the world, I think that person has a heart just like I do. And that person has dreams to succeed just like I do. And that person wants to thrive and reach their highest potential just like I do. And I think we need to answer the questions of why first. As far as what we could do for affordability and housing, I support Section 8. I think that we need Section 8 housing helps to have a more integrated community. I support construction that makes sure that we have housing for people of every income. And I believe that we should raise the minimum wage to a living wage. It's an important thing, and we need to make sure that we're setting up every child to succeed. Stability is so important in a kid's upbringing. I think you not only want to make sure that you're supporting kids in school, but that you're supporting parents. Because the number one factor in a kid's education is their parental involvement. And if parents don't have affordable housing and access to food, you're setting up kids for failure. And politicians normally just want to give you answers to get them to the next election, but we need to think about investments for the next 20 years, not what's going to win you in 4 years. Thank you.
Our next question will be delivered by President of the African Association of Madison, Mr. Ray Kumapai, and it will be directed first to Ms. Stubbs.
Thank you. In the wake of ICE, that's the acronym for Immigration and Customs Enforcement, and rumors that any immigrant may be investigated or apprehended for proof of status, many documented immigrants, both old and new, including naturalized citizens, are uncertain of how the new implementation of immigration laws and policies, and especially ICE implementation techniques, would affect them or disrupt their lives. This fear is real. What avenues of assurances and reassurances do you intend to pursue to alleviate the fears of these documented immigrants in your assembly district? Thank you.
Thank you. The separation of families at borders is inhumane, it's immoral, it's cruel. But I can say firsthand here at Dane County, one of the things that I did, because I'm going to always be a proven leader, is we created the Office of Immigration Affairs and hired our very first specialist, Fabiola Hamden, because we wanted to reach the issues and concerns for immigrant families that's in our community that need the help, that don't understand the laws that have been imposed upon them, and they need to have a specialist that can help them through these very difficult times and connect with resources, connect with attorneys that are outside of our purview, but continue to give them all the services that they need. And one thing that you need someone who can write policy, and then you need somebody who can pass policy. And those are things that I've done both hand. And I can say firsthand, I've read the executive that President Trump had given out during the time of the border, and it just didn't do enough. You know, in it perpetrated the problem, but also when we talk about what federal government needs to do, it did not give a plan on if and when we were going to return all these families back together, unite the children with the parents. We need to have an elected official who's going to stand up with policy. And I'll tell you right now, I stand with U.S. Congressman Mark Pocan. He's endorsed me as the only candidate in this district, and he is fighting ICE. I am going to continue to fight ICE with our U.S. Congressman Mark Pocan, and I know firsthand when we continue to work collaborative with all the organizations that I've worked with over the years, and most of them are located in South Madison. I know we're going to turn things around, but let me be very clear. You need to elect some Democrats, some people that have your belief systems, some people that have your values, and some folks that's not afraid to fight against oppression, depression, but will be successful. Thank you.
Mr. Imes.
Why do I feel like I'm always bringing the crowd down? So, a couple things. One is, in some ways, we have to move beyond Washington. Now, I agree with Sheila on supporting Mark's position about disbanding ICE. I think, performance is the only thing that counts. That agency has completely changed its mandate, and it needs to be fundamentally changed or disbanded and recreated. So I'll just say that. And I think you're going to hear some good things from Shabnam in terms of how she's taken on these issues. But from my standpoint, this is also an issue for the business community. Okay, immigrants are a huge contributor to our economy. There's a lot of businesses that will not function the next day if they lose their workers. So we need someone that can reach out to the business community and make sure that they're engaged in terms of talking to policymakers and making sure that we have to do as a community what the federal government is not doing. To Sheriff Mahoney's credit, he refused to cooperate with ICE on this intensive activity. That's the kind of leadership that we need in this community. To say, the Trumpism, that stuff's going to happen. We need to move beyond that. We need to protect people. We need to protect families. We need to protect businesses. And until we can start winning some elections again and pass policies that we can all support. Thank you.
Ms. Lofti.
Thank you. Wow, that is a really good question, and I'm an immigration attorney. It just goes right to my heart. The fear is absolutely real. People who are on DACA, people who are undocumented are always terrified, and that's shameful that we live in a world like that, because I think to just be human right now in this timeline is exhausting, because you wake up and you got to worry about your career and your family and your in-laws and your kids and if they're going to come home from school or not, and are you saving for retirement, and are you eating healthy, and are you getting your exercise in. The last thing somebody should have to worry about on top of that list is if they're going to be deported. DACA kids specifically are people who went to school, don't have a criminal record, have been here their entire lives and know no other country besides the United States. I refuse to call them illegal. I call them new Americans, because that's what they are. There's a lot that we can maybe do in the assembly or even at the local level. The mayor of Philadelphia recently broke their relationship with ICE because he could not in full faith execute that agreement between officers and ICE. But the person in the Capitol to advance this has to have the communication skills to speak to people who are not in this room, and yelling at people in the Capitol is not going to get to common ground. I was born in the middle of a war, and I lived in 7 houses on 3 continents by the time I was 10 years old. I never felt a sense of belonging. I had to learn how to deal and make friendships with kids that were very different from me. I had to learn empathy. I always had to see the world from somebody else's perspective. And if we're in the minority, I believe I have the skills to reach across the aisle, talk to Republicans who are terrified that MS-13 is the one coming across the border, and to dismantle those false beliefs and to show them that that guy that's trying to live here is not your problem. The guy... I was passionate about that.
Thank you. Mr. Garthwaite.
Thank you. I feel you. This is where I like to point out that we have local officials at the county board level, at the municipal level, who do fantastic work here in where we live. So we have a sense of humanity. We know how important these issues are. So my salute to our local officials who understand that this is a this is basic human decency, as been said. What assurances can I give you is the question if I'm elected to the Assembly. The unfortunate reality is that it's going to be a heavy lift to take the Assembly. It just is. I mean, we're going to elect Democrats here in Madison. I would say our highest priority is to elect a Democratic governor. Regardless of who your candidate is in the next gubernatorial election, you have to get behind the Democratic candidate, 100%. I think that's the most important thing we can do, because a lot of the issues that we're facing regarding ICE can't be solved if we're in the minority in the state assembly. We need a Democratic governor. We need Tammy Baldwin to be reelected to the United States Senate. That is a huge, huge race. The fate of the United States Senate, the balance of the Senate rests on whether we are going to elect Democrats nationally. And that's where it was alluded to earlier. This is a federal issue, largely a federal issue. I regret that, like Sheriff Mahoney has to be put into an ethical dilemma of deciding whether you're going to enforce the law. He's doing the right thing, I think, in that he's saying this is wrong, this is morally wrong. But we need to prioritize electing Democrats at the top of the ticket all the way down to make sure that we are not putting public officials like Sheriff Mahoney in positions where they basically have to defy their obligation to enforce the law.
The next question will be delivered by Leslie Orentia, Director of Community Relations, the University of Wisconsin-Madison, and that question will be fielded first by Mr. Imes.
Data, perception, and politics continue to frame our gaps in achievement and opportunity as a black and white issue. As such, other communities of color that are increasing in demographic size, that also face grave inequities, are often absent from the politics and from agendas for change. What is your understanding of challenges facing our Native American, our Hmong, our Latinx, our Black, and other underrepresented and under-resourced communities? And how do you seek to leverage your role as a representative in the State Assembly to make change within and for these communities?
Good question, Leslie. I think what it comes down to is our funding priorities in our school system. You look at some of the tax credits that we're providing to businesses. The manufacturing agricultural tax credit that started some years ago, and it wasn't going to be that much, and now it's grown to almost $500 million over the biennium. Over $100 million of that tax credit is going to 381 filers that make over $1 million a year. Or actually over $2.8 million a year. 80% of those tax credits go to people that are making over $1 million a year, and this is before the Trump tax credits. So our funding priorities are wrong. And the business community, their big complaint is they can't get enough skilled workers, and they can't get people to their places of employment. So we need to fund our school system at a level that's going to protect the communities that Leslie talked about. As I said, to make sure that those support structures are in place, and that we're funding the public services in terms of health care, in terms of placement services, in terms of counseling and mental health services or other services that those communities need, by changing our funding priorities, by making that money available. And I think that's going to get us down the path where we can actually help those communities, because we'll provide the resources that are a priority to all of us. Thank you.
Ms. Lofti.
Thank you for your question. I got to ask you if you can. You're asking what can we do to deal with disparities?
I'm asking, what is your understanding of the challenges facing the communities that I mentioned? And how do you seek to leverage your role as a representative in State Assembly to make change within and for these communities?
So I've knocked on doors in every single street in the entire district, and I noticed the differences. And some people say, nobody has come to my door and nobody pays attention to us. And I've made sure to reach out and to promise that you can hold me accountable, that I will come to your neighborhood meetings, I will pay attention, and I will be a voice for you. I think that you play a significant role as a leader in a community, and you're held to a higher standard. I think that my election to the Capitol speaks volumes for an Iranian American that wasn't born in the United States to achieve that. It gives people hope. Barack Obama gave me hope and got me to want to run for office as well. I think that we need to make sure our priorities are straight, especially when it comes to education. And maybe we should question if property taxes is the way that we should be funding schools. That's the way it's always been, but that may not be the best way to do it. Warren Buffett suggested maybe we should have a lottery system, and your kid goes to whatever school is picked by random. Schools would be fixed immediately. And I think that we should question the way things have been and try to do things differently. I think we should be more integrative, and I think we need to be more inclusive. And if I was your representative in the Capitol, I will do everything I can to use my position for good and to make sure that whoever is in there with me is a person of color.
Mr. Garthwaite.
Does that mean I have to drive my kids across school if it's a lottery? Okay, all right. That's a really good question. So as far as policy goes, one of the things that I was gratified to see for this gathering is the number of different community organizations that are involved here tonight sponsoring this. Community organizations and giving them support. They know the issues a lot better than someone sitting in the office in the Capitol. So your role is to make sure I know what's going on when I'm in the Assembly, to tell me what you need. Sort of related, today the Madison School District actually released just this morning its strategic plan for the coming year. And if you haven't seen it yet, I was very inspired by what I saw. Interestingly, I did not realize that there were almost 100 different languages spoken in Madison schools. That tells you something that, I don't know, did anybody else realize that? That tells you, it's a challenge for a school to be an inclusive environment when you have that many different languages being spoken. So underrepresented communities need stronger support networks. So schools, we need support networks or my wife is a bilingual aide in the school, so I know how important that is for non-native English speakers to have someone at their school that can help them navigate something that is in a language they don't really understand. So funding priorities, as John refers to, is extraordinarily important. And I think we talk about where's all this money going to come from? How are we going to fund all this stuff? We have 30 million tons of frac sand that leaves the state of Wisconsin every year. Did you know that? We don't do any fracking here, but 30 million tons, if you had a $10 ton tax on frac sand, that's $300 million right there. That would do a lot of good to give community organizations such as yours the support they need to provide the support.
Thank you. Ms. Stubbs.
Thank you. First and foremost, we must recognize here in Dane County, it is a county of the haves and have-nots. It's a beautiful place to live, but we must recognize that people are treated differently. There's the fact. The first fact was this. When the State of Black Madison book was released by Urban League and other organizers in this community, it told us in the state of Wisconsin, in Madison, that we were in trouble with the African American community. But that wasn't enough for some people that were in position to write policy. And then the Wisconsin Council of Youth and Families came along and created this Race to Equity booklet. And it talked about how bad it is in Dane County for African Americans. We are 5.5 times more likely to be unemployed than our white counterparts. African Americans are 6 times more likely to be poor. African Americans, our children Our children are 13 times more likely to live in poverty, which is the largest gap that we have around the United States. We have a problem feeding our children. In addition to that, our children are 15 times more likely to be placed in foster care and residential home. And let's talk about our African American males that are incarcerated. 8.8 times more likely. And we're sitting here talking about, do we have a problem? Yes, we have a problem in Dane County, Wisconsin, and all across the United States. But I tell you that common ground, that vehicle that we all need to talk about is education. Our priority in this state, and you all are here, and let's make it very clear, our tax dollars cannot be building more prisons and the Department of Corrections and locking up more people and not ending mass incarceration. But our priority must be education. Let's go out and educate people, and then we can move them out of these lists of poverty and 40 indicators to make us the
The next question will be delivered by Greg Jones, president of the NAACP Dane County branch, and it will be fielded by Ms. Lofti.
Good evening. I am Greg Jones, president of Dane County NAACP. Following the 2020 census, the Wisconsin legislature will redraw lines and boundaries of electoral districts. Last month, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled against a challenge to Wisconsin's current legislative map, leaving in place the current lines and boundaries as well as questions about the fairness of the electoral map. What is the best approach to ensuring independent redistricting reform in Wisconsin?
I love that question. It is the #1 issue that is near and dear to my heart, above education, even though that polls higher, because redistricting and gerrymandering has to do with our democracy. It has to do with your vote and your vote counting. This is the country that stands for government by the people and for the people. And if we have a system in place that is rigged and your vote doesn't count and the other party is in control, even though there's more votes in our party, that's a problem. I believe that the #1 thing we need to do is to make sure we have fair maps, and the way to do it is to look at other states who've already done it. I would support legislation that puts redistricting in the hands of a nonpartisan committee, and I would look to Iowa as an example that has already done that. There's already a bill that's been written. I would look at that and I would see if that's the best thing for us to do. I think that I believe in my ability to win on all the other issues on the merits. I don't need a rigged game. We need a fair game, and we need to go toe-to-toe on the issues and win on the merits, not because we cheated. That's how I believe it. I think we need fair maps. I would look to Iowa.
Mr. Garthwaite.
Thank you. I'm in a full agreement that Iowa has a very workable model for as far as redistricting go. This actually fits right into that concept of restoring faith in our public institutions. When I was young, I never believed that there was this mass conspiracy to rig our elections. So this claims of voter fraud, to me, is fraud itself. It doesn't exist. And frankly, anytime it does get prosecuted, it turns out to be a Republican who's doing it. So, and that's true. You can look it up. That's what I mean about restore. We need to be confident that our elections will go off without a hitch. And I believe that they do. But I think, there's been a fraud perpetrated, that there's this massive fraud going on. I don't believe voter ID needs to be eliminated completely. There's no need. We never needed it prior to, trying to rig elections. I hate to say it that way, but it does feel that way. Get rid of voter ID. We don't need it. So that's one of the first things I would do in the legislature is get rid of voter ID. I also want to urge my Democratic colleagues to be honest with ourselves. Democrats in the past have had the opportunity to set up a redistricting process that was fair, and we've punted on it, and we punted on it because we thought we would have majorities for a long time. Well, here we are. So be honest with ourselves, get it done, because if we don't do it, we know the other side is not going to do it. Simple as that.
Ms. Stubbs.
Thank you. First and foremost, I was raised in a house that the NAACP is just who I am. So I keep before me the Voter Rights Act of 1965. I must continue to fight hard to make sure that my rights will be something I take to the voting poll all the time. It's my democracy, and I will not allow anyone to infringe upon my rights. But more importantly, in Dane County, redistricting has been done. So of all of the panelists here that's sitting here, I'm the only one who's actually been able to make a difference. In Dane County in 2016, I was a co-sponsor of the redistricting maps that we've done. We put a criteria together. We asked that it be fair, that it actually be independent, that it be impartial, that it be accountable, and that it be transparent, and that we have citizens draw the map, because elected officials should not be choosing their constituents, but it should be the other way around, where constituents elect their electeds. In addition, what I can tell you here in Dane County is that we've been able to do it because we are working at a local level. Local level government is the closest level of government. And I can say this, because I guarantee the Democrats will take back over, it's when we need to sit down, we need to have a strategy, and we need to make sure we represent all people. And I can say this firsthand at Dane County. We've been doing it the Dane County way, and what I will do is I will remember you on this race, in this journey, and let's do more than that. When they've tried to take our rights, go vote. That is the most power you can have, so power to the polls is what I'm going to ask you to do.
Mr. Imes.
Thanks, Greg. Really good question. You know, a couple things. One, we need to be strategic about this. In 2010, when we lost, remember we had the Democratic governor, we had the Assembly, we had the Senate. We lost. We didn't show up, and that made a big difference. And I think the Democrats missed an opportunity there, because there's that lame duck session in between the election and people swearing in. The best thing we could have done was pass nonpartisan redistricting reform like the Iowa model and make the Republicans reverse it. Because you know what they were going to do, what they were going to do. We didn't know they were going to trash their hard drives and have secret rooms across the street from the Capitol and secrecy oaths and everything else. I mean, that was a little extreme. But what was the first thing the Republicans said? Well, the Democrats would have done the same thing. And the Dems at the time were like, yeah, we probably would have done the same thing. We have to be principled about this. And we have to be strategic and make sure that they own it, so that we can point that out and use that to build electoral support. As I mentioned, I support the nonpartisan redistricting model with Iowa. You know, the other thing is, when you look at this race, I mean, one of the persuasive reasons why I got in this race is Fighting Bob LaFollette said, the reason we have open primaries is the voters deserve a say. We had a lot of Democratic leadership support one of our candidates very early on, including the incumbent, within 10 days of her announcement. And, you know, that was very, very persuasive for me in terms of one of the reasons I got in this race. And then I would echo what Sheila said, is we have to vote. You know, we undervoted 250,000 votes in 2016 statewide. Okay? Trump didn't get anything more than Romney. You know, we lost by 22,000 votes. And elections matter. Thanks.
The next question will be presented by Julia Holman, President of Madison Metropolitan Chapter of the Lynx. And it will be fielded by Mr. Garthwaite.
Julia Holman, President of the Madison Metropolitan Chapter of the Lynx. What qualities distinguish you from your primary opponents?
I'll just say that there are 4 quality candidates, and I mean that genuinely. We've actually, we've been bumping into each other a lot, and it's actually very inspiring that you can have very cordial elections. So if anything comes out of this, hopefully that's a model of how elections should be. What qualities? So I mentioned earlier, like I always make the point of saying that I grew up on a dairy farm, so you'll get somebody that works, and works, much to my family's chagrin sometimes. A very hard work ethic. That's a question. That's a quality I think that is something I'm very proud of. I also mentioned that I worked in biomedical research for 17 years, so that search for truth is what science is. Science is the search for truth. So I spent 17 years of my life searching for the truth in science. So that's what we do. I think, so we have 99 representatives in the state assembly. There are no research science professionals. There are more tavern owners in the assembly than research science professionals. I mean, we have 30 attorneys, can we elect one scientist, please? I don't think that's a lot to ask. And evidence-based decision-making is what guides me. So I have strong progressive principles. Providing the basic needs for all of our citizens is my overarching goal, but I'm not going to, stand on party principles if I know that the truth isn't going to get us to where we want to go. So that's how I guide myself as far as decision making goes, is based on evidence, and that's you can't keep repeating things over and over again in science and expect a different result if something's not working. So the approach that we take is don't do that anymore because it doesn't work. It's not that, it's that cut and dried. So you'll get somebody who has creative ideas and is not opposed to trying new things, and change is a good thing often.
Ms. Stubbs.
Thank you. What voters in the 77th district tells me is this: they want an effective leader, someone who's going to stand up for education, someone who is definitely going to reduce our daunting racial disparities that exist, someone who's going to protect our environment, someone who's going to make sure we give access to health care to everyone, someone who's going to defend a woman's right to choose, someone who's going to stand up to the NRA and write tougher gun laws, and someone who's going to make sure we get funding for our seniors, people with disabilities, our most vulnerable population. But most important, they want someone with experience. I have 13 years of experiencing balancing budgets of $500 million to $650 million. That's what I've always done. I've been bold with policy. I've been effective with policy. I've been passionate with policy. So let's not change the statuses now, because I am one who is going to represent you. Yes, I'm a fighter. I've been fighting all my life. All kinds of systems. Yes, I've been challenged all my life, but it's because of what I've learned being in college, that history will meet the future. And I ask you today, when you elect me, you will meet the future. That's the difference between me and my opponents. And on top of that, I am the only candidate who has the endorsement of the incumbent. I am the only person who has Therese Brosseau's endorsement, who represented this district for 20 years, because she knows I understand complex issues and I know how to balance budgets. I've had the leadership. And what I will tell you is this: Madison is on the bridge of making history. I will be the first African American ever elected to the state assembly. Help me. Again, power to the polls.
Mr. Imes.
All right, folks, I'm going to bring you back down again. Okay. So, The question was, how am I different from the opponents? I think I bring this diverse background and these diverse experiences, which are going to allow me to be that much more effective in the legislature. Before we did the small business, I actually ran the environmental affairs for Quad Graphics, pretty big company in the state. I was with them for 11 years. So I had that responsible corporate background. Now, it was over 20 years ago. I've made a payroll every week for 25 years. In the nonprofit, I've worked with environmentalists, and I've worked with corporate executives, and I've worked with local officials on statewide policy issues. I think I'm going to be able to engage other policymakers because of that credibility. Okay. Now, each election is a kind of a snapshot of what's happening, all right? As was mentioned earlier, the Dems are at a low spot. We're at our lowest point since the 1950s. We have 35 seats out of 99. Now, I think we're going to pick up 4 or 5 seats. I think if we have a big enough wave, we could pick up 8 or 9. But the maps are going to hold us back. It's as simple as that. So then it becomes an issue. Who has the background and the experience to engage the other side to get some things done? Now, I know Joel Kitchen's up in Door County. Now, he's a Republican, but he works a lot with the League of Conservation Voters. I think I could work with Joel. I know Amy Laudenbach, who was an environmental consultant before she was a legislator. She's down in the southeast part of the state. I think I could work with Amy. So someone's got to bridge that. Now, I think the governorship is in play. I agree with Mark. I mean, that's a real possibility, and we're going to have to work our tails off to win that race. And I'm committed to doing that personally, and I hope all of you are personally interested in doing that, because that's really the linchpin, and it'll make it easier for us to get things done in the assembly.
Ms. Lofti.
Thank you. So when Donald Trump became president, the very first thing he did is to sign an executive order banning Muslims from coming to the United States. It was a crisis that happened all across the country, and the very first thing I did that night is to organize. I created a group, it's called Immigrants United, and within less than 1 week brought 10,000 people together from around the world. We organized, I told people what airline to get on, what airport to get to, what attorney would be waiting for them, and how to get in front of a judge. As an immigration attorney, in addition to that effort, I've won 98% of my cases, and I deal in an area of law where the stakes are high, the margin of error is non-existent, and people put their lives in my hands. I've won 98% of my cases, and if you Google my name, you could read about the work that I've done way before I ever decided to run for office. I have worked on healthcare, and then it was the March for Our Lives, and then it was the Women's March, and then climate change, and then the UW sent an email saying, Shabnam, you're a badger. You go talk to the legislators for funding for the university. And I just remember thinking, what else? What else is going on? I have a knife in my heart, and that is why I'm standing before you today. This country is a rich country, and we can do a lot more. People tell me that I inspire them, that I bring energy, that I'm the Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez of Madison. We want new people. We want millennials. We want to energize the base. We want role models for the next generation. We want to take our state back, and that is what I offer.
Our next question will have a format change. We will now go to candidates having 1-minute answers. We're going to call it the lightning round. Our next question is going to be delivered by Norma Gallegos of the Latino Consortium for Action, and it will be fielded first by Ms. Stubbs.
Good evening. I'm Norma Gallegos with the Latino Consortium for Action. And the question is, the inability to obtain driver's licenses is one of the biggest issues for the undocumented community. How do you plan to work in a bipartisan way to advance legislation that will provide all Wisconsin residents, regardless of immigrant status, with a driver's license?
Thank you. That's a wonderful question. Here in Dane County, County Executive Joe Parisi authored Access to Opportunities, where we talked about driver's license recovery. We must put funding there because we know people have made simple mistakes and violations and their licenses are gone. It is an opportunity for them to get in our criminal justice systems. We must turn back those opportunities and say, no, a driver's license violation is not the reason a person needs to be incarcerated or in our local jails. What I'll do at the state levels, I'll join the other representatives, the Democrats, and if I need to join Republicans, fine. Because at the end of the day, we have to get things approved. We have to get things to be passed. I'll continue to pull out consortiums. I work very closely with Central Hispano, La Soup, and a lot of the organizers, and I would ask them, what do you suggest is the best way to do it? But most importantly, I will be effective because I've always been bold and I know how to get proven results. Thank you.
Mr. Imes.
You know, the driver's license should be based on skills, Norma, and so I support that. And I think I could engage the business community to be very supportive of that policy. I mean, one of their biggest complaints is their inability to get people to their places of employment. And we haven't created regional transit systems in the places where we need them. You know, 10% of all the young people in Dane County don't have a driver's license and are not likely to get one. I mean, this is a new era. People are Ubering around and everything else. So I would reduce those barriers. I would engage the business community to say this is a strategic issue for the business community. And then let me just say this. This administration, this governor, this Republican majority, they took the driver's license application process that was at the DOT building on University Avenue and moved it out to Middleton. And people that don't have means, you have to take like 2 buses to get your driver's license. This is a voter suppression technique, and I think we should support that civil rights.
Ms. Lofti.
Thank you for the question. I think it's a great one, and it shows why I'm not a fighter, I'm a strategist. You have to tell people what's in it for them, and this is an issue that we can certainly have bipartisan support for. There's a lot of people that are Republicans and they own dairy farms, and there are people who are undocumented and they work on those farms. Don't you want those people tested? They have to come to work. Don't you want a driver's license test? Don't you want them to know how to drive? Don't you want them to, if there was a car accident, don't you want to know who that person is? There is bipartisan support on this issue, and what I would do as a strategy is to convince those Republicans who already have buy-in on this to convince the rest of them, because that's how you do it. Thank you.
Mr. Garthwaite.
Spot on there, spot on there, spot on there. So, and I got, something hopefully is spot on as well. I do want to mention my website is in Spanish, so es.markgarthwaite.org, so please visit that website. How do we work across the aisle is the question. I'm the only candidate up here who actually has done that in the Capitol. There was a very complex regulatory issue that we needed one Republican to do the one right thing. We got him to do the right thing, so I've been there. I can work across the aisle quite easily when I go in there not asking for a fight. Because if you go into the Capitol looking for a fight, you're going to get one. And I think that's important to remember. I appreciate the sentiment, but that's the environment that we have there. This is why we need to get rid of voter ID. They don't want anyone to have IDs, immigrants to have IDs, because that might, get them to the polls. They don't want that. We need to get rid of voter ID for one thing. The other thing is,
our next question. We only got 2 more questions. Relax. Our next question will be delivered by Nichelle Nichols, president of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, Kappa Psi Omega Chapter, and fielding the question will be Mr. Imes.
Yes, Nichelle Nichols, Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, Kappa Psi Omega Chapter. With the new development of Madison College on the south side of Madison, what will you do to ensure that residents living in this immediate area will still have access to affordable housing and have the dignity of remaining in a neighborhood they have called home?
Nichelle, a couple things. First, I want to talk about the technical college system. My first degree was an associate degree in environmental health technology. I believe very strongly in those hands-on degrees. It made a huge difference for my career. I didn't get my bachelor's until I was 30, but I was able to work with that associate degree, and we just actually celebrated the 50th anniversary of that. I think the MATC South Campus here, I think that's a great blessing for this area. I'm a big advocate for clean energy. I think there's opportunities in clean energy for the residents here and for the students that go there that are greater than almost anything we can do right now in the state. The number one entry position for kids coming out of school right now is wind technicians. They're coming out with certificate programs. They're coming out with associate degree programs, and they're pulling in $55,000, $60,000 a year.
I'm really sorry.
Ms. Lofti.
I'm not sure I understand the question, and I'm not going to make up some answer. You're saying, what are we going to do in the south side of Madison for building? How are we going to make sure people have housing? Because having a school is going to...
Audience. In plain speak, oftentimes when we see new development come into neighborhoods, the folks that have lived in those neighborhoods are pushed out. It's called gentrification. So my question is about, if you are elected and this development is happening in your district, what are you going to do to ensure that the residents who have been in this community from the get-go are not pushed out? What will you do?
I think that one thing you could do as a legislator is to make sure that there are no laws where eminent domain allows a builder to take over an area and push people out. I think legislative-wise, that's what you could do. I think that I have been involved in conversations with the Bay Creek area over their grocery store and made sure that the city council hears the voices of the people that live in that neighborhood. And I have been a bridge builder when I notice that people can't communicate with each other. That's the problem. If a conversation is going too tough, people can't confront, people walk away, people yell at each other, and I believe in my communication skills to be a bridge builder and to make sure that the voices of the communities in that area is heard.
Mr. Garthwaite.
So very quickly, first of all, making sure that Madison College is affordable for the residents that live there. So we have to prioritize making sure that they can afford to get an education there. This gets really complex and in the weeds, but part of the new development issue is that housing that's affordable is not profitable for builders, and that's the problem. So in order to address that issue, one state in the United States, North Dakota, has the concept of a public bank that funds things that traditional banking system does not fund. And there are a whole bunch of other reasons why we should have a public bank here too. But I think that would be a good step, because then we as a community, our local leaders, can prioritize. We want to make sure that the residents that are here can stay here. So if we need to upgrade housing that's still affordable, we could utilize a public bank that funds it in ways that the traditional banking system does not. But that's going to be a heavy lift. We have to create that, but there is.
Ms. Stubbs.
Thank you. The first thing you must do is watch policies and laws that are not going to come through communities. Make sure that they're not annexing you out. So local control is critical. Elect people at local levels and every level of government that's going to value your opinions and your belief systems. I say firsthand, we must continue to create affordable housing and home ownership. I find that it is very upsetting that we have people that have lived in apartments for 30, 40 years in South Madison, and if they're good enough to live in an apartment for their loan, why can't they own a house in this community? In addition, bring in opportunities that are economic, that we are creating jobs for people that live here. So like we have with Alliant Energy Center, I'm on a master plan committee. I will make sure that we create jobs that for people to live in South Madison, and I will make sure I stand up to every developer who wants to come here.
This is our final question of the evening. Before we go to closing remarks from the candidates, I would just like to remind everybody that out in the lobby is the Madison City Clerk's office. If you have any questions or concerns or suggestions on voting, the process, how to register IDs, those are the folk that you want to talk to. The last question of the evening will be presented by Terry Strong, president of the Madison Alumni Chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority, Inc., and it will be fielded by Ms. Lofti.
Thank you. I'm Terry Strong, president of Madison Alumni Chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority, Incorporated. My question is pretty simple. If elected, what are you going to do different than your predecessor?
So, okay, great question. Thank you very much. One, I strongly believe in fair maps. I want to get rid of gerrymandering. This is about democracy and your vote counting. Second, I want to remove barriers from the economy for people that are millennials. I want to raise the minimum wage. I want to make sure that there's a single payer system so that everyone has access to health care. I want to remove barriers to the economy. Sometimes I talk to a mom who says, I have to keep my job for healthcare, but all my money goes to daycare and I'm stuck. That is not the Wisconsin that I want to live in. I want Wisconsin to thrive, and I think that we need to be the voice for the future. And I also want to deal with the student loan debt. When I graduated from law school, I had $150,000 debt, $40,000 of which is just interest. We should be ashamed of ourselves, the amount of wars that kids my age have to deal with just to survive. It should not be exhausting to be human. Thanks.
Mr. Garthwaite.
If I have time left over, I'll give it to you. To directly answer your question, what would I do differently? Did you know that I grew up on a farm? I've mentioned that before. So my younger brother represented the 49th Assembly District for 2 terms where I grew up, and he ran in a seat that was held by Republicans for 92 straight years. He ran as a Democrat, and he won. And he's the only Democrat to have held that seat within the last 100 years. So there's a little family blood here that kind of itching for that kind of opportunity. But I understand how important it is for our elected representatives in Madison to know what we sound like outside of Madison, because the hard truth is we have to win Democratic majorities outside of Madison. So President Obama said words matter. That resonated with me. Tone matters. So we have to be very cognizant of our word choice, how we sound, and work.
Ms. Stubbs.
Thank you. That's a wonderful question. I go back to Scott Walker have cut millions of dollars from our public schools after passing Act 10. One of the major priorities I would go to is getting our priorities correct. I will stand up and make sure we are not spending taxpayer dollars to continue to build prisons and Department of Corrections, but I will make sure those dollars will be used towards education. I will come back out to the community and meet with you. I'll hold town meetings. In addition to that, I think it's very important that I be not just in the room, but I be at the table. What we've been missing is my voice at the state capitol. We have 0 African American women elected at the state assembly, and there's 99 seats. One thing I'll do is make sure we elect people that are experienced, bold, and will stand for change. But most importantly, I'll make sure that I continue to represent you, the people. This is not about me. This is about you. And that's why I have a proven record. And that's why I have over 60 electeds.
Mr. Imes.
Thanks, Chair. Really good question. You know, I think it comes down to approach. I think mine is going to be more practical. I think it's going to be more effective. It's going to be more cooperative. I'm not going to give up my progressive values. I mean, I'm running for high road policies to protect women's rights, to protect our teachers, to ensure affordable health care, to restore our state's environmental heritage, which has been lost over the last 8 years, in our good government tradition. You know, the other thing is, I realize that our young people today, they want to work for a company that has a soul, and that means family living wages, and it means family-friendly benefits, it means education and training opportunities, and they also want to live in a state that has a soul. And we've been soulless the last 8 years. And their parents and their grandparents, they want them to live in a state with a soul. So I think it's going to be a question of approach in terms of achieving the
That concludes questions from our panel. Now we will go into closing statements from each candidate. I believe at the top of our time, I started to my immediate right. So this time, because it's my prerogative, I will start to my immediate left. Ms. Lofti, you will have exactly 3 minutes for your closing statement.
Thank you. Hello? Hello?
Oh yeah, do it right here.
Oh. Thank you guys so much for coming out, and thank you for the opportunity to be here. I'm going to finish my last question and say the other thing that I would do is to get rid of the amount of money that's in politics right now. When somebody donates more than $200 to my campaign, I have to document the person's name, where they live, their occupation, their employer. But PAC money is dark money, and nobody knows where that money comes from. When Scott Walker was trying to win his recall, the first thing he did is go to Las Vegas and get $200,000 from Sheldon Adelson. And you guys deserve to know where money is coming from in politics. And that is why my campaign does not accept PAC money. You should know every single person who's donated to me. The second message I want to leave you with has nothing to do with my campaign. Something that I didn't hear enough of in my life, and I wish you would hear it. You're smart, you're beautiful, you're talented, you're full of skills and abilities. The world is a better place when we inspire people, when we lift people up. And I believe in every single person in this room to reach their maximum potential. I think that we need to lift people up, and people don't hear it enough, the amount that they can contribute to this world. And I would wish that everybody reaches for that maximum potential. The third message that I want to leave you with is that there is a posting outside that I've provided of the names of all the Democrats that are running contested races outside of Madison. They need your manpower, they need your resources, they need your support. This race is not about me winning this for myself. It's about taking back the majority. I've knocked on doors 10 hours a day, 7 days a week. And when I go through doors now, it's only for my second or third time around. People say whoever has the worst feet on election night, that's who's going to win this. And on the 15th, when this race is over, I've already promised every single Democrat outside of Madison that I'm going to help you with your race, because it's about taking the majority back. I believe in those words, we the people. I believe in the American dream. I believe this is the land of opportunity and it's the beacon of hope. And I believe that our democracy is worth fighting for. Your country needs you now. Thank you.
Taking the podium next to deliver his closing remarks, Mr. Imes.
You surprised me, JR. So, a couple things. I wanted to go back to Nichelle's question. I believe the answer to a lot of the challenges that this community faces is the lack of jobs and the lack of economic development. And I'm familiar with a group called BIG, which is called Blacks in Green. I mean, it could be Latinos in Green, in Chicago, that is really focused on green infrastructure. It's focused on renewable energy. It's focused on installing solar panels. It's focused on investment. And it's been a tremendous success. And I think it could be a model for this community. So there's a lot of leadership in this room. I'd encourage you to look at that, and I'd be open to discussing where some of those opportunities might be. And I think the placement of METC at that location is going to help foster that. So that's one. Two, I'm not going to ignore you. Okay, if I win on August 14th, I want to spend more time with the leaders in this community and understand what the needs are and find ways to leverage the skills that I have. I'm going to be successful at engaging the other side. I'm going to be successful in that Democratic caucus to get things done that's really going to matter for folks in this community. The worm has turned. You know, we've kind of hit our low spot. You know, people say, John, why are you running? You know, the Dems are, the lowest point they've been since the 1950s. Okay? It's always darkest before the dawn. Gaylord Nelson, Father of Earth Day, governor and senator, he started his rise in the mid to late 50s. And Bill Proxmire and Pat Lucey. And then it was a 30-year run of progressive leadership in this state. That's why I'm running. That's why I want to leverage the diversity of experiences that I bring that are going to allow me to be an effective leader and an effective representative for all of you. I really appreciate you coming out today and look forward to our further discussions together. Thank you.
Next to deliver her closing remarks, Ms. Stubbs.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here this evening. I must say firsthand that this is not the time to elect inexperienced people to go to our state capitol and take on a fight when they've never had to write out any policy, let alone getting it passed. But I can say firsthand that I would be honored to be the state representative for District 77. I know that I would be effective. I know I would be bold, and I know that I would bring about a change. The voters in this district have been very, very clear about what they wanted. I've had to go to many meetings. I've knocked on a lot of doors. They've asked me very good questions. They've even challenged me. They know about policy. They know what they want from an elected. And they made it very clear, Sheila, this is the time that we need a fighter at our state assembly. And this is the time we need to elect you. You have a proven record. Matter of fact, U.S. Congressman Mark Pocan has endorsed me, was with me 13 years ago. Former County Executive Kathleen Falk is with me. The former electeds that are also on the county board and on city is also with me. I have alders all around this district. I have 9 of 12 state representatives and a part of the delegation from the state of Wisconsin that has endorsed me. You know why I have over 60 people that have endorsed me? Because I can get things done. I am a proven record. I am someone who can always write policy. I know how to be a strategist. I've had to deal with negotiations. I've been a former probation parole agent for 8 years. How do you think I got through that system? It wasn't because I didn't know. I'm smart enough. I'm educated. I have 2 bachelor's and a master's degree. I'm here from South Madison. I grew up with all kinds of systems, but that's not what it's about. It's about electing the best person. I am by far the most experienced person on this panel. And the reason people got in this game is because they're not ready for change. Thank you.
And to deliver his closing remarks, Mr. Garthwaite.
Thank you very much. I compliment the panel because those were very thoughtful questions. I know it's hard, with 4 of us up here, it's hard to really get a lot of information that's going to differentiate the 4 of us. So you asked very thoughtful questions. My gratitude to all of you for coming out. Engagement is really hard. Shabnam referenced, how important it is for you to get out. Half of it, more than half of it, is just showing up. So kudos to you for showing up. You have a difficult decision. You have 4 quality candidates. So you came here probably looking for something that would differentiate among the 4 of us. So I will suggest to you that one of the candidates actually threw out some new ideas. So I talked about taxing frac sand. That's $300 million to fund roads and schools. I don't know if you know how bad the roads are out there, but if we want to win Democratic majorities, we got to fix roads. It's not a sexy topic here to talk about, but we have to do it, okay? That's one new idea. I talked about a public bank. That's a new idea. You want new ideas, right? Mobile health clinics that I've talked about for. One of the problems we have is delivering health care out in rural areas, and not just rural areas, a lot of underserved areas. Mobile health clinics exist in other places. They have strong, proven records. It's not actually much of a new idea, but it's a creative idea, and we should use that. Think about when I was a kid, we had the bookmobile, right? I don't know if anybody else had the bookmobile. We didn't have a library, but the library came to us. We can utilize that model in many different creative ways. Finally, what we did not talk about tonight was the gun violence issue. And that's a hard conversation. I would suggest that we should, one thing that is very troubling to me, and I don't know if you know this, but 3D printers can print guns now. Do you know how scary that is? Maybe we should shift the conversation away from guns into bullets. Why aren't we regulating bullets? Because if you can make your own gun, doesn't matter what gun regulations you're going to pass. That's a new idea. We need new, fresh ideas. As I said, I work in science. The goal of science is to find the truth. I will work very hard for you finding the truth and pursuing new ideas. Thank you for your consideration.
Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes our forum. How about a warm round of applause for all of our candidates?